Hold on to your mug. We're in for a wild night.
We've got a big chunk of lore to talk about, so maybe let's dive into that.
Oh yeah,
we do have some lore to cover tonight. Yeah, so very excited to jump into the lore of the old gods. Like we were mentioning earlier, we are going to break this up into separate episodes for each old god, but this is part one. We will be covering Yasiraj tonight. I'm very excited. So I will turn the mic over to Goliath to kick us off here.
All right. So, just to provide a little context here, do you guys remember the last show that I was on? We covered the origin of Stormwind, and I talked about how that one was, pretty easy because we only needed to go back a few centuries or whatnot to the foundation of a human kingdom. Well, for this one, we need to go to the very origins of space-time and the entire cosmos, so just a heads up for what we're in for here. So, basically, in the beginning, there was... literally, was before there was anything else in the universe, there was the light, just like this cosmic force of warmth and glowing goodness and life that... basically, think like, just this vast, maybe think like the Aurora Borealis throughout the entire universe or something, but it's all gold. But then there were some areas that it kind of flows like a sea, and there were areas that it left a little dry, so areas that were dark. And from that lack of light came a force called the Void, the manifestation of nothingness. Maybe you've heard the philosophical idea that evil is just the absence of good. This is like a literal version of that within this universe. And so the void and the light clash because they're literal opposites. And actually from their clash, they create a sense of Big Bang and explode into the entire, creating the entire physical universe from the conflict of light and void. And so you have a bunch of different planes, parallel dimensions that come to exist. But the one that we're concerned with here is the one where the void exists. And you have these beings who form in it that are called the Void Lords, who want to break into the physical universe and consume everything. Because that's the nature of the void. It always hungers. It always wants to consume. Much like Nate's cat wishes to consume his dinner.
So true.
And they are never satisfied. And so what's something that's unique and that you have to know about the world of Azeroth that most of the World of Warcraft story takes place on is that it's not just a planet like a hunk of rock that our Earth is. This is a world that has what's called a world soul inside of it, which is essentially a baby version of a vast cosmic being called a Titan, who are kind of like the protectors of order in the universe. And the Void Lords are kind of peering through from their side of the dimension, and they're like, if we could just corrupt one of those titans, they are so powerful, they could, let us into the physical universe there, and then we could eat everything. But titans are so powerful that the only way they can actually get to one is while it's sleeping, like kind of incubating inside of its egg, and they corrupt it that way. So what they do is all the Void Lords pool all of their power together to briefly open this one hole into the universe, and they just flush into the universe. They spit out all of these horrible abominations of destruction and chaos that come to be known as the Old Gods. And basically they just go flying through the universe, crashing into completely random planets. The Void Lords don't know what planets have souls and which ones don't, so it's just, go for as many as possible. And 4 old gods that we know of crash land on Azeroth. And so Azeroth does have a world soul, and basically their whole goal is that they drill, like that they stick their tendrils deep down inside, and over enough time they'll corrupt the world soul into being a force of darkness and evil and all of that.
So when you say the ones that we know of, so there could be so many more out there.
Yes, out in the universe, there could be many more old gods on other worlds, and the writers could always technically introduce, oh, you didn't know about this old god that was also on Azeroth, but that's future lore's problem if they decide to do that. For now, we assume there are these core 4, and there are other things that we might get into in future episodes that are not quite old gods, but also kind of. But we don't want to get too complicated here, because this is all really simple, right?
Yeah.
Are you following me so far? Do I need to elaborate?
Following you so far, is Cahoon also technically an old god, or is it just
He's the kind of strange exception there that I would explain, but that would go off on a whole other tangent that we don't have time for, which is the reason we're dividing into parts in the first place.
Makes sense.
Yeah, he's the kind of weird in between. But so essentially, Yasharaj, who is the one that we're talking about today, our big focus, is the most powerful, the largest of all of these old gods. Like they aren't working as a team. They fight with each other. They are manifestations of darkness and chaos and selfishness and consumption. Put a lot more adjectives and verbs in here. And so, they fight with each other for dominance just as much as anyone else. But Yasharaj is the undisputed most powerful of all of these. And they rule what becomes known to history as the Black Empire. They secrete these minions, which some of them are very bug-like. They're known as the Kier, and others are the Noraki, or what we know, especially from a lot of Hearthstone cards, as the Faceless. So these are literally minions that are just like secreted from the gross fleshy bodies of the old gods to serve them, and they build, as you can see in the picture that we have up here, like these massive monoliths and this empire of chaos and darkness and evil, pain, suffering, despair. Again, lots more adjectives that we can throw in there. Just put in all the negative words possible and you get the Black Empire and beyond. So yeah, this is the way that things are. And these are massive cities that are built around the old gods' bodies, actually. So like they are almost kind of serving as living cities for their minions in a sense. But then the Titans come along and they find Azeroth, and they are like, holy cow, this is a really big problem. We sense there's a world soul down there. It's going to get corrupted. We have to do something about these old gods. But they have a little problem. The Titans are really, really, really big. And let me put it this way. As you can see, our current image here, we have a map that is showing the domains of the old gods in the Black Empire. If you guys look at the big purple area, that is all that is ruled by Yasharaj. So you can see that is the biggest section there because he is the most powerful. Also, you may notice the names of some of the elemental lords there. The old gods, when they crash landed on Azeroth, they enslaved the powerful elemental lords into becoming their top lieutenants. Which is why you get elementals who included old god thematics a lot of the time.
Okay. Yeah. So it looks like Yogg-Saron to the north, Nizath to the east, Cthulhu to the west, and Yasharaj kind of in the middle, and then kind of down to the south. Yeah, taking up kind of the bulk, and then you see some of the other elemental lords, like you're saying, Alakir, Ragnaros, Neptulon, and then Therazane, who I'm not familiar with.
Who really needs a Hearthstone card? They haven't given the last elemental lord a Hearthstone card. They need to complete the set. But I won't go on that tangent rant for long. So I could go on that for a while. But anyway, and one thing you need to understand is the old gods are rooted down. They can't get up and walk around. They are planted right there. They're like a fungus that is spreading its tendrils down beneath the earth. They're very ingrained into the world. And but you also have the stalks that pop up, so that they have their disgusting tentacle, eyeball, incomprehensible fleshy forms that are above the surface as well. And Yasharaj is right there in the middle of all of that.
Yeah, because they're kind of digging to try and get to the world seed, so hence why they're planted
which is,
in that
of course,
spot,
right
because
at the center.
they're digging.
Yes, exactly. And speaking of digging, allow me to create an illustration for you guys. Imagine that you have a sand castle on the beach, and it's infested with ants. You're going to have you are powerful enough, you could go in and just try smashing the ants, but you're probably just going to wreck the sand castle, aren't you?
Yeah,
that's a good illustration.
Yeah,
probably. Yeah.
The problem that the Titans have, because they are so powerful, they are so huge, they could just go in and get rid of the old gods, but they're buried so deep within the world that they're afraid that they're going to do irreparable damage to the world while they're doing it, like uprooting the flowers with the weeds, so to speak, and then digging up the garden like they're like a dog, and the analogy could run away. But at any rate, so what they choose to do instead is to build smaller soldiers to serve as their lieutenants. These become known as the Titan Forged, and their leaders are the Titan Keepers. One of the Titan Keepers you're familiar with as a card, High Keeper Ra from the Mogu cultist, when you get enough and you summon him. He's one of the ones who is created, and there are many others, as armies to fight against the old gods. And so they do go to war against the old gods, they fight against the elemental lords, and but Yasharaj, when they try assaulting Yasharaj, he's way too powerful. He overwhelms their minds with visions of madness and chaos and turns the Titans' armies against each other. And so it's almost like an unwinnable fight. And so what happens is that the Titan leader, Amin Thul, decides that, okay, this enough is enough here. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and he does the thing that they were trying to avoid doing. He just reaches down his colossal Titan hand from the sky, just yanks Yasharaj right out of the ground, and just tears him up in the middle of the air, and all of his remains come cascading down to the world. And it does
so metal.
It does get rid of Yasharaj. Little problem. The whole reason they didn't want to do it in the first place, it leaves a giant gaping hole in the world. And so here's the thing, you guys know about, you see the word arcane a lot, especially in the mage class. It's a spell class and whatnot. The arcane magic, bear with me here, is the literal magic life force, the blood of a world soul, in a sense. So there is this hole that is so deep in the earth, the magic is leaking out. It's like the world soul has a mortal wound that it is bleeding from. And so the Titans are like, we need to fix this. And so what happens is that they go and they turn that into a sea that is infused with arcane energy to kind of cap off the wound there. And that becomes known as the Well of Eternity. It is actually going to, that actually plays a huge role in other lore down the line. In fact, the Well of Eternity is how we get the origin of the entire race of night elves. It evolves them from trolls, but that's a whole other story. But yeah, it's pretty powerful with all that stuff. That's how we get the Well of Eternity.
Wow.
And yeah,
if we look back at the map real quick, is like he's just getting like yoinked out of the middle of this out of Azeroth here, like just right.
Yep, the very center of the continent there
is now just like a gaping hole that then is turning to like an arcane ocean.
Is that perhaps like
Exactly.
Ungoro Crater or?
No, see, here's the thing. This is so long ago that all the different continents were one Pangea-like mass here. It's later on, during what is known as the Shattering and the War of the Ancients, that Well of Eternity gets destroyed and becomes the Maelstrom, and then the land gets shattered into the world that we know today. But this is currently in this map with the old gods and the Black Empire. This is like everything is still connected here. It's one solid Pangea-like landmass.
Gotcha.
And Yasharaj was right in the middle of all of that, but now he's not.
Like you said, like that's so metal. Just like enough. And just rip him out.
Yeah.
It's that
Deus
sound.
Ex Machina.
It's that sound when you open the old gods card packs and you hear the eyeballs explode. It's that like.
Oh yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. So that's pretty crazy. Okay. So what happens then? Like, is Yasiraj just gone, or does he get back, or how's he like floating around space? Like, what do they do with him? Do they take him out and squish him, or what? Like,
all his remains that got torn apart fell back down to Azeroth. But essentially, what happened was that his what are called his final breaths, in a sense, like his kind of like a final curse, became known as the Shah. They are these dark spirits that feed on negative emotions like pride and fear and anger and other stuff too that is flipping my mind right now. Yeah, they become to inhabit the land that's eventually known as Pandaria and create a lot of problems there, which actually ends up influencing Pandaran culture, where they develop their whole, namaste monk mentality, because you have to keep emotions balanced if you don't want to get the Shah going. But so that those come from Yasharaj.
okay. So I have pictures up then. Like, I think we're skipping a couple of slides here, but I've got the pictures of the Shah. So they take some different forms. One of them kind of looks more like Yasiraj, but some of them are the smaller ones. Like you can see the shadow beast that comes out of the possessed villager in the Hearthstone card.
Yeah, they're sort of like the prime arc Shah in a sense, and then there's like the smaller minion type of Shah that spawned from them.
Yes. So like you were mentioning, I've got these bigger ones here. The Shah of Anger is one, and then this other one's called the Shah of Fear, and they all kind of look the same, but these crazy colors look really pretty cool.
Yeah.
Anyways, all right. Scooping back real quick, like my next slide's up where the heart. Do we want to loop back to that?
That's where we're going right next.
Cool.
So, so you guys remember Ra, who we already talked about, and you showed his card there. He was kind of taking a trip down to the southern part of the continent, and he saw, here's where all those parts of Yasharaj just kind of fell, and they're creating a huge corrupted mess everywhere. We need to do something about this and clean this up. So, he did that, and he built several vaults. The reason that Ra comes from that Mogu cultist card is because the Mogu were his one of his primary servants as a race. And so he built a vault in order to hold the corrupted heart of Yasharaj, and signed his Mogu servants to guard it, which is why they are down in that area that, again, later becomes known as Pandaria. The hope was that this is something that we can study, we can understand the nature of the old gods, so that we can learn how to better combat them, because after the whole gaping wounds thing from Yasharaj, they realized we can't do that with the other old gods, so we're just going to build prisons for them and try to keep them contained. So they're minimalized, but they're still existing as a threat. So the Titan Forge, the Titan Keepers, they all want to figure out how can we understand and combat them better, and they're hoping that basically making a laboratory for this heart of an old god will enable them to do that. As far as I know, they never succeeded in gaining any useful research from it. But, it was it was supposed to be something that was secure where it wouldn't do any harm to anyone. But that doesn't mean that there wasn't some energies that were sensed out to those who would be susceptible to them. You may remember that I mentioned one of the minions that came from Old Gods were an insectoid race. Back then they were called the Akir, but after a while they ended up coming to the surface. It's the whole story where they had a big war with the entire troll race, a whole other thing. But basically they ended up splitting into different groups. And some of them were drawn, although unknowingly, to the land where remains of Yasharaj were. And there they settled and evolved / mutated into a race we know as the Mantid. And we have a few cards who are Mantid in Hearthstone. One of them is our legendary here. Nate, would you like to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, it's the rogue legendary Zeril Poisoned Mind. But yeah, it's definitely a Mantis looking card. And I believe we have a few others as well. I can't really think of them off the top of my head though.
Generally from Mean Streets of Gadgetstan, because the Jade Lotus is very Pandaria race themed. So they have the Pandara and they have the monkey-like Hosen, the fish-like Jinyu. They also include some Mantid as well, like the Jade Swarmer and the Shadow Sensei.
Okay, yeah, Shadow Sensei and
Shadows.
Claxy Amberweaver. And actually, we had talked about this a while back in one of our other lore episodes, but Grand Empress Shekzara is a Mantid as well, right?
Yes, she is. She is the queen of the Mantid, in fact. And I had almost actually forgotten about her card because I never see it played. But yeah. But yeah, she is very much she is a high Mantid, and you can see they take on various different forms, but they're all very insect and praying mantis inspired there. And there were other Akir that took on other forms, like the Nerubians up in the north, and one or two others. So those are ones we'll talk about at some point in the future. But right now, the Mantid are the key ones here. And they had a very particular cycle that they went through where once every, a certain period of time, 1,000 years or whatnot, they would go and swarm against the Mogu armies who had been left to guard. And they built this, this huge wall eventually called the Serpent Spine, which is essentially the Great Wall of China, but with cool fantasy stuff. And the Mantid are basically like, sure, we every time we do this, we fail, but we're really winning because the ones who kill were the weak ones. So really, they're just making us stronger, and eventually we'll be strong enough to completely overwhelm them, and we'll bring back our master, Yasharaj, eventually. And so that's the thing that the Mantid tend to do for a really long time, every so often. And it's, again, something that is aggravated by the presence of the old god deep down buried beneath them, though they don't know the specifics of where he is or whatnot. Let's see. I think that covers just about all the basics. And was there anything else before we get to the whole Garrosh story? Because we're going to get into why Garrosh looks so weird in his 1,000 wins portrait.
Oh,
or is it 10,000 wins?
What is this mural here that I've got of the...
Oh, yes. Yes, that is essentially Mantid art, I believe, honoring their god. Here's a really fun fact. This is the closest that we got to any sort of image of Yasharaj for a really long time. Hearthstone is actually the very first time we got art of what Yasharaj looks like. The Hearthstone team got to decide forever in lore what this previously unseen old god would appear as, which I just thought was so cool and was one of the reasons I loved Whispers of the Old God set. Same for N'Zoth, actually. Although N'Zoth has since appeared with that same model in World of Warcraft, and Yasharaj hasn't because Yasharaj is dead. That body is destroyed. He was said to have 7 heads, and the art just kind of focuses on one of them. But the Mantid referred to him as the 7-headed god. I use your imagination as to what you think the rest of the huge city-sized Yasharaj body looks like outside of what we see. That this is like one long neck with his, massive, horrible eyes and maw and all that stuff there.
It definitely looks awesome, and I think that it's so cool that I just love the idea that this is something that they got to debut in Hearthstone, that we're seeing this for the first time, be like, oh yeah, this is pretty sweet. And all these Warcraft players are like, we've been hearing about this for a long time and never seen it. And now we're seeing it for the first time in a different game. Like, just
yeah,
it's really cool. So yeah, it looks awesome and creepy, and yeah, it's just great.
What a way to market towards the WoW players to come play Hearthstone.
No joke.
It worked for me. I mean, I just happened to join around the time when Old Gods was still in the current meta. And like I was saying before the show, I'm just like, oh, these are the cool looking packs. I'm just going to get, not those boring basic packs. I want to get the Old God cards. And so I'm ending up with more of this advanced stuff that doesn't go together when I don't have a lot of the basic Hearthstone cards yet. But yeah, no, it was really awesome experience for me to be able to see what these characters look like that I'd been just recently learning about as I started to get into the lore myself. And so we have our big setup here. Oh, sorry, did you have a question, Sheep?
Yeah, I did. I know that Yasharaj was completely kind of upended and torn, and his heart is kind of being guarded by the Mogu cultists and whatnot. Do we know for sure that Yasharaj has been killed, or is it possible that like he's still kind of like down there, still alive, or is he like canonically killed at this point?
At this point in the story, the heart and the Shah are all that remain of him. In a sense, his power kind of lives through them in a reduced way. So he has a presence, but not like, full conscious sentience like back when he was whole and whatnot. So yeah, at this point in the story, but we'll get to things a little bit later. So yeah, now we come to, like, this heart's been locked away for a really, 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 really long time. But then along comes a guy named Garrosh, and he finds this heart, and at this point he is war chief of the Horde, and he's kind of steadily been going down the tyrannical warmonger path already, showing a lot of racism to other members of the Horde. You're like, no, Horde is for the orcs. They're the true Horde here. I don't want any of you, because I can't trust you to be loyal to me. And he's kind of on the xenophobic side, and has a lot of power issues. But yeah, he wants to get all sources of power that he can, and so he and his excavation team end up finding, they're just searching for some sort of rumored ancient weapon or artifact or whatnot, and turns out to be the heart of an old god. And so what he does, he goes and takes this heart of an old god and says, like, this thing's dormant, I need to activate it in order to get the power. So he dunks it in literally the most beautiful, magical stream area called the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, and completely destroys and corrupts it because old god power. And all in order to just wake up the heart so that he can use it to make himself more powerful. And then he goes back to Orgrimmar and starts becoming even more tyrannical than he'd been before. And all of this just pushes everyone over the edge. Pretty much the majority of the horde, especially all the non-orcs, but even a lot of the orcs like Thrall and stuff, who are like, this is just wrong. They go and unite in what's called the Darkspear Rebellion, which is actually led by Vol'jin, who becomes the next war chief, by the way. And they unite with the Alliance forces, and this is an event in the game that is known as the Siege of Orgrimmar, which is the horde's capital city, and where Garrosh has a stronghold here. And so one of the first, we have Garrosh, but Garrosh actually shared some of the old god's power with his best buddy. You guys remember the warrior legendary from Whispers of the Old Gods by chance?
Hey, Malkorak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you remember what the flavor text says?
No. I'll have to look that one
Not
up.
offhand, no.
Looking it up.
Yes.
Oh, it's
For those of you listening, that awkward pause, just people suddenly doing their research.
It says Garrosh's best buddy. It's true. Look it up.
Well, now you don't have to because I just told you. But yes, he was Garrosh's chief enforcer, and Garrosh is like, hey, I got some of this sweet old god power here. You're my chief enforcer. I'm going to give it to you too. So he's a boss that you fight before you can get to Garrosh in the raid. And yeah, so he's very much a warrior, and I think that's it's really neat. That was actually the first time that card was the first that I had heard of him, because I started playing the game after that period. But then I later found him and read about him in some of the books. I'm like, oh, okay, now I understand who this guy is.
So I see that he's got a giant, like a blade for his arm, and we had talked about in previous lore episodes, like with Blade Fists, for example, like they got corrupted after they drank like the demon blood, and that was different. But like, is this any of the same? Like, you can see how he's got the purple stuff on him, and like it looks like he's kind of been corrupted. Like,
by old gods, yes, not demon blood on this one.
this is different. Did
Yes.
the giant like sword arm come later, or did he already have that?
I'm not entirely certain on that one. It's possible that there is an orcish clan called the Shattered Hand that does a whole ritualistic thing where they chop off one of their limbs and replace it with a weapon. So it could be something like that he's doing.
Like Ash in the Evil Dead. Chainsaw arm.
Yeah, that sort of thing. Or if you guys just remember Kargath Bladefist from Outlands, then he's the leader of that clan, actually. So it could be something they did with that, or maybe it's just kind of a mutating into your weapon thing that's a part of the old god power. I'm a little rusty on that finer point myself. I'm sure that someday someone will come along and very strongly correct me on that, who's even more of a lore fanatic than I am.
So unlike the Blade Fist, which has no master, Malkorak does.
Very much so, yes. Yeah, he is fanatically loyal to Garrosh, to many, many, many faults. But yeah, so he's a guy that you fight for then. And actually, you also fight some Mantid, because Garrosh absorbed... he's the guy who has Yasharaj's power now. So all the Mantid are like, oh, this guy is, Yasharaj now, kind of. So we're going to go and follow him. And so they kind of like become Garrosh's bodyguards, too. And so you have to get through like the most elite of them, called the Galaxy, in order to be able to get to Garrosh. But then finally, you get to Garrosh, and he just full-on absorbs all of the heart's power in the fight to try to stop you. And he grows like, the huge grotesque tentacles and eyes and all the typical old god kinds of things. And on the hardest version of the fight, he actually pulls you into a vision of the future that he's seen, where he is the ultimate conqueror of Azeroth, and Stormwind lies in ruins, and he has the bodies of the entire Rind family, like Anduin and Varian and Jaenon, all of the Horde leaders who oppose them. They're just all up on spikes for everyone to see what happens to those who defy the mighty Garrosh.
Wow.
so you're like, wow, we really need to make sure this is happening. Oh, and everything is, of course, old god corrupted. It's purple. Purple is generally something that is very bad and evil in World of Warcraft. Purple is old god color. If you see things that are a mixture of black and purple, it's generally a big red flag there.
So
Or purple
Garrosh
flag.
has no chill.
Yes. Garrosh like never had any chill. It's just that he got the power to exert that no chill even more so over the course of his story.
I loved
But
hearing
yeah.
this because when I first saw the artwork, like I just saw all these eyeballs everywhere, and I was like, my first thought was, like Cthulhu, but
Right?
because the eyeballs, right? But it's just old god corruption. Well, specifically from Yasiraj. So that's really interesting. I like it.
Yeah. Cthulhu is the most iconic with his big eye there. I will not apologize.
That's glorious.
But like eyeballs and tentacles and mouths in places where they shouldn't be, that's a common theme across all of the old gods. So like just because it has the eyes in weird spots doesn't necessarily mean it's directly connected with Cthulhu. He's just the one who has it like a huge lighthouse on the top so you notice it more.
Yeah. All right.
So yeah, so what happened, and this is getting to the parts where Sheep, you were asking a bit earlier, is he fully gone? Well, Garrosh kind of absorbed all of that power, but like it got drained from him again, and the heart had what the wiki refers to as a failure or a disruption where, I don't know, I guess the old god's disembodied heart had a heart attack or something. I don't quite know precisely, but essentially, because prior to all of this, like you have killed, as the players, you have gotten rid of all of the Shah. The Shah are no longer a thing that you need to be worried about, and now the heart is gone too. So with those few vestiges of Yasiraj gone, the old god is basically completely unmade. As you finish the fight with Garrosh, you see a little thing that is called like last whisper or last echo of Yasiraj, and then it just fades away because this is the final, like it does not exist anymore. And of course, lore writers in the future decide to retcon this for whatever reason. But because this is the nature of ongoing stories. But as of right now, Yasiraj is fully 100% unmade, dead, gone forever. Doesn't mean that the effect he had goes away, though, because the world's got to feel the scars of the actions of the old gods forever. Like I said, the reason the world is the shape it is in right now is because there was a well that exploded, but that magic well exists because Yasiraj was right there, and that had to get put there when he got yanked out. So these guys are the origin for so many different things here. And if you think that being the origin for the shape of the world is big, wait until you get some of the old gods we're going to talk about in future episodes. Some of them are responsible for the existence of entire races as they exist now. I don't just mean all their minions. I mean the effect they had on playable races like dwarves and Naga and beings like that. But that's all for a future time. And a great encouragement for us to actually do those future episodes to pique your curiosity.
Exciting. That's incredible. I mean, it's just crazy. And so what happens to Garrosh after that? Like, I assume like you have to fight him. Do you kill him, or do you kill like the essence of the old god like dissipates and then he's back to normal, or what is the?
Yeah, essentially, Garrosh has such a strong will that his mind was actually not. He was using the old god's power, but somehow it wasn't actually controlling him. He was just evil on his own at this point. And so like he just kind of went back to normal after it all got burned off in a way. And they actually arrested him and decided to hold him for a trial in Pandaria so that everyone who he had injured could help decide his fate. Only problem was that He kind of escaped from the trial because of a renegade bronze dragon with time travel abilities, and Rathian, who you may remember as a card from Mean Streets of Gadgetzan. He's a black dragon, and who had the idea that there's a big problem that's coming up ahead, and we need to unite all of Azeroth. So their bright idea is to break Garrosh out of prison, send him back in time to recruit an army of orcs that will then come and conquer all of Azeroth, so that Azeroth isn't a bunch of factions fighting itself. It's one huge unstoppable army for when demons come or old gods come or whatever else. And so, yeah, Garrosh's story goes on after this. He doesn't die for a little while into that. That's the expansion that is known as Warlords of Draenor in World of Warcraft that came after all of this, which happened in the one known as Mist of Pandaria. But that's all another long, complicated story dealing with time travel and bronze dragons and it honestly is enough to... Anything with time travel is enough to make my head hurt if I think about it too much. So I'd like to stop here if you don't mind.
Yeah, no. Probably a good idea before we go too far down the rabbit hole. But like, wow, okay. I love it when we get like... I remember when Wrathion came out thinking like, oh, dragons. Oh, this card seems kind of cool. But like... knowing that there's a whole story that I've never heard before behind this character is like, whoa, that's cool. So one of these days we'll have to...
That's his human disguise. Like, all dragons have the ability to take on a mortal form, and that's the one he likes to use.
Nice.
Very cool. All right. Do y'all have any questions?
When's part 2?
right like I wanted so bad to like jam it all into one episode, but I knew it'd be recording for like hours, right? But it's so interesting, and like I'm like, okay, what happens next? I'm ready for it. So
yeah, me
stay
too.
tuned, I suppose. We'll figure that out later on.
No, it's great. I really like that we decided to split it up and go into more detail, because if we would have jammed it all in and rushed it, we wouldn't get all the detail that we're getting. So
you would have had the "we didn't start the fire" version.
Yeah.
Well, which I want to turn into a parody song at some point, but that was going to take a lot of writing to summarize all of them. I did manage to write one about Yasharaj recently, though.
Oh, that's right. Yes, we have a parody song for
Get
everybody.
back, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, Goliath has a parody song for everybody. I don't have a great way of playing it live on air, so I'll post it right after the episode. So stay tuned, and you can all listen to it. If you're listening to the audio version of this podcast, like as soon as the credits like roll, the song will be there. But like, yes, I will get the mixer working over the weekend, and everybody keep me accountable. Okay, I will do it. It's there, sitting on my desk. Please do. Very, very fun episode. So which old god comes next in the series if we do all 4 or 4 plus, because we've got a couple ancillary
I think that Yogg-Saron is probably the next biggest one that we'll want to tackle, because he's the one, like I said, like the impact on why some races are the way they are. N'Zoth has an impact in that area too. He's responsible for a lot of things. He has close ties with Deathwing. And Cthulhu is probably the most minor in terms of being more isolated in its effect. So we might save Cthulhu. How did I not catch that one? I did a great one earlier, but I missed this one. But so that's likely going to be our order. We're probably going to go Yogg-Saron, N'Zoth, then Cthulhu with other relevant things sprinkled in as they come. But things could change depending on gauged interest or what people want to hear the most.
Sure.
I'd be willing to go with that. Of course, we have our thing that we also we want to keep up with the sets coming out soon, so this isn't guaranteed to be the very next episode either.
We'll make it happen. We'll have to loop back around to that, but this is a lot of fun.
Oh yeah.
Excitement abounds. And I can't wait to hear more about Yogg-Saron Praiseby.
Yes.
Praiseby randomness.
More to be wild.